Pune, two MBA students here have been found guilty of murdering a friend, or they have been sentenced to life imprisonment.
2008, murder and experimental technology. A 24-year-old MBA student from India was just convicted of murdering her former fiancé by allegedly poisoning him with arsenic-laced sweets. The problem? Aditi Sharma pleaded not guilty, and there was no evidence, no eyewitnesses, just the allegations. So, how was she convicted? Brain Electrical Oscillation Signature. That's the name of the technology Sharma voluntarily agreed to undergo. BEOS. It wasn't a lie detector. You weren't asked any questions. You didn't give any verbal answers. It just measured your brain's activity. So, electrodes were placed on her scalp. Then through a pair of headphones, she listened to statements made by the police. Things like, I gave him the sweets laced with arsenic. I met him at the railway station. I just killed my ex-boyfriend. See, Sharma wasn't actually required to say anything. The police were just relying on her brainwaves to speak for her. The test was looking for what scientists at the time called experimental knowledge. Not belief, not guilt, no admissions, but recognition. If her brain responded to a statement like it was a real memory, the assumption was she must have been there to commit the crime. Now let's get into the scene. In 2004, Udit Bharati, Sharma's former partner, was found dead in Pune, India. The autopsy revealed arsenic poisoning. Suspicion immediately turned toward Sharma and her boyfriend at the time. But there was no physical evidence, no eyewitnesses, no confession, just a possible motive, and eventually a sheet of paper filled with brainwave recordings. See, Sharma volunteered for BEOS in an attempt to clear her name, but the results didn't clear her. Unfortunately, they did the opposite. They indicated she recognized the details of the crime and therefore she must have committed it, except the BEOS results were presented in court. And despite the fact that this technology had never been universally validated or really proven to be effective, this is 2008 mind you, the court accepted it as sufficient evidence. So Sharma was then found guilty of poisoning her ex-boyfriend and sentenced to life in prison. So what actually is BEOS anyway? It's based on EEG. You may be familiar with it. It's common for neurologists to use them for sleep studies, and it's a way to measure brainwave activity. The BEOS method interprets specific patterns of brainwaves as signs of prior experience. It doesn't detect lies, it doesn't prove intent, it simply measures familiarity. It measures how your brain responds to certain statements. But obviously, recognition is not guilt. A brain might respond to a sentence for dozens of reasons: prior knowledge, media coverage, stress, and just the simple fact that the police are asking her these questions to begin with. And yet, in a court of law where normally, at least in the US, hard facts and beyond reasonable doubt are required, this became sufficient evidence. Now clearly, BEOS wasn't just made up. It was developed by a neuroscientist and clinical psychologist based in Bangalore. His goal was to use EEG signals, the brainwave readings, to identify what he called experimental knowledge. In other words, memories. The idea was that the brain reacts differently to events it actually experienced. You don't even have to speak. Just hearing the right phrase, something only a guilty person might recognize, should be enough to trigger a spike. It sounded compelling. However, because your brain can react to a statement for 1,000 different reasons, recognition does not equal involvement. You can recognize a detail because of stress, because of suggestion, because someone told you, or even because you're innocent, and still know what happened. But BEOS didn't clarify any of that, nor did the prosecutors try to decipher it. The readings didn't explain why your brain reacted, it just reported that it did. And in court, that's all that those prosecutors needed. The case caught international attention, not because of its brutality, but because of its obscure method. Scientists, legal experts, and ethics committees all weighed in. There were no peer-reviewed validation or studies, no international standards, and this wasn't even reproducible across any labs. In fact, the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences in India recommended against its use in court, but by that time it was too late. The technique had already been used in over 150 criminal cases. Sharma's was just the one that made the headlines. However, in 2009, a year after her conviction, the Bombay High Court granted her bail. The ruling stated that the evidence was insufficient and that the BEOS results were not definitive. But there was no retrial, no exoneration, no formal dismissal, and no compensation for her. Just simply a dismissal, just simply, oops, sorry, too bad, you're free to go. Today, BEOS still hasn't been formally banned despite the recommendations by the National Institute of Mental Health and Neurosciences. In fact, its usage has only really declined. Variations of BEOS have still shown up in multiple criminal investigations, often just as supporting evidence. However, as of today, there still hasn't been any published long-term studies, no legal review board, no oversight by a national or even world kind of governing for the use of this neurological technology in criminal cases. In most legal systems, your thoughts are indeed your own. They are protected, and most importantly, they are private. But in this case, Sharma willingly underwent an experimental technology, and it led to her conviction. How could she have known that her mind would convict her? Unfortunately, she was just out of options. Can brainwaves be a confection? Confection. Can brainwaves be a confession? And if it can, are we still innocent until proven guilty? Because this is getting definitely close to that Minority Report movie.